Find more questions and study at your own pace on our website. The link will be in the description. Let's get started. Question 1. You have a public load balancer that balances ports 80 and 443 across 3 virtual machines named VM1, VM2, and VM3. You need to direct all the remote desktop protocol connections to VM3 only. What should you configure? Option A, an inbound NAT rule. Option B, a new public load balancer for VM3. Option C, a front-end IP configuration. Option D, a load balancing rule. To direct all remote desktop protocol connections to a specific virtual machine within a set of VMs behind a load balancer, you need to configure an inbound NAT rule. An inbound NAT rule allows you to map an external port on the load balancer to an internal port on a specific VM. In this case, you would map the RDP port on the load balancer to port 3389 on VM3. This ensures that all RDP traffic is directed to VM3, regardless of the load balancing setup for other ports. Question 2. You have 5 Azure virtual machines that run Windows Server 2016. The virtual machines are configured as web servers. You have an Azure load balancer named LB1 that provides load balancing services for the virtual machines. You need to ensure that visitors are serviced by the same web server for each request. What should you configure? Option A, protocol to UDP. Option B, session persistence to none. Option C, floating IP to disabled. Option D, session persistence to client IP. To ensure that visitors are serviced by the same web server for each request, you should configure session persistence to client IP on the Azure load balancer. This setting ensures that traffic from the same client IP is always routed to the same backend instance, providing consistent service for each visitor's session. Question 3. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. You have 5 terabytes of data that you need to transfer to Subscription 1. You plan to use an Azure import/export job. What can you use as the destination of the imported data? Option A, Azure Blob Storage. Option B, Azure Data Lake Store. Option C, Azure SQL Database. Option D, a virtual machine. Azure Import/Export service is designed for transferring large amounts of data to and from Azure Blob Storage and Azure Files by shipping disk drives to an Azure data center. Therefore, you can use Azure Blob Storage as the destination for the imported data. Question 4. You have an Azure subscription that contains an Azure storage account. You plan to create an Azure container instance named Container1 that will use a Docker image named Image1. Image1 contains a Microsoft SQL Server instance that requires persistent storage. You need to configure a storage service for Container1. What should you use? Option A, Azure Files. Option B, Azure Blob Storage. Option C, Azure Queue Storage. Option D, Azure Table Storage. To configure persistent storage for an Azure container instance that will use a Docker image containing a Microsoft SQL Server instance, you should use Azure Files. Azure Files provides fully managed file shares in the cloud that can be mounted as volumes in containers. This ensures that the data persists even if the container is stopped or restarted, making it the appropriate choice for scenarios requiring persistent storage. Question 5. You plan to create an Azure storage account named Storage1 that will contain a file share named Share1. You need to ensure that Share1 can support SMB multi-channel. The solution must minimize costs. How should you configure storage? Option A, premium performance with locally redundant storage. Option B, standard performance with zone redundant storage. Option C, premium performance with geo-redundant storage. Option D, standard performance with locally redundant storage. To support SMB multi-channel in Azure, you need to use premium file shares. Among the redundancy options, locally redundant storage and zone redundant storage are supported. Since the requirement is to minimize costs, locally redundant storage is the most economical choice while still providing the necessary performance for SMB multi-channel. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to check out our website where you can find more questions for this exam. The link will be in the description. Thank you for watching and good luck on your exams.